Okay, well, maybe we'll get started. Um, Welcome to Supporting Transition to Life After High School. My name is Carla Verscher. I'm the Executive Director of Inclusion BC. I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from my home office on the traditional unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and other Coast Salish people. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the lands that each of you are joining from this morning. I also wanted to highlight what I think is a fantastic resource that has recently come out from the BC Office for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Challenging Racist British Columbia, 150 years and counting. I think this is a fantastic resource for anyone in our province to read, but particularly those that work in social justice. So, before we get started, a little bit about this session. So this session is part of the Inclusion BC virtual learning series. This is the 8th month we've featured sessions. I would like to acknowledge our generous sponsors, the BC CEO Network, the Province of British Columbia, and the Public Guardian and Trustee. This will be a 60-minute session and we commit to ending on time. The session will be recorded and made available on the Inclusion BC website within a few days. If you are needing closed captioning, you'll see there's a CC button at the bottom that you simply need to click. Your microphones will be muted and we'll be collecting all the questions and comments through the chat. So you can enter questions for the panelists at any time, but we've dedicated some time at the end of the session for a Q&A period. I want to introduce a bit of the support team. We have Sebastian and Leah here. Each of you give a wave or just maybe say hello so you pop up on the screen. Oh, I think you're muted, so each give a wave, that's perfect. And Sebastian and Leah are here. If you run into any technical difficulties, you can direct message either one of them through the chat. We also have Erica here with us today, and Erica will be collecting all of the questions throughout this session and then supporting the Q&A at the end. Okay, so as many of you know, Inclusion BC is a provincial advocacy organization, and we support an individual and family advocacy program. And each year at this time, we start to brace because we know that there'll be dozens of young adults and their families calling us at this time of year with expectations about what life will look like after high school. And there's no one there to catch them and allow them to flourish as they had planned. What we've learned over the years is even when people have done everything that they were asked, they followed the best planning, started early, set up transition meetings, attended welcome workshops. At 19, the supports to allow themselves and the young adults to start those early years from a place of abundance are just not there for everyone. So the purpose of this session is to introduce you to a few of Inclusion BC's partners in supporting transition and provide you an opportunity to learn about each of their unique mandates. We have 3 fabulous panelists here today. To get us started, it's Tracey Isles, an advocate for the representative of children and youth. And then Tracey will pass it off to our next Tracey, which is Tracey Matovich, who works with Children and Youth Service with the Public Guardian and Trustees. And our closer is Leanne Dospittle, who is our advocate for service quality. So each of them, again, will provide a brief overview of their roles and services, and then we'll have a short Q&A at the end. Over to you, Tracey.
Great, thank you so much, Carla. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be here today. I'm coming to you today from the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh, and I want to acknowledge it because the land that surrounds us is part of who we are, and it reflects our histories. I'm an outreach advocate with the Representative for Children and Youth, and I'm really happy to acknowledge that my roots here in Prince George, the territory of the Lheidli T'enneh, are planted in an area known by the Carrier people as Shastee or the Grizzly Bear Trail. I wanted to talk a little bit about RCY. It's an independent office of the legislature here in BC, and it's often considered to be the watchdog of the child welfare system in the province. The creation of the office was as a result of the Honourable Ted Hughes' review of the child welfare system and the concerns that were raised about budget cuts the impact that it was having on children and families. So the review recommended the creation of an independent advocacy and oversight body, which is now known as the RCY. The purpose of the office can be summed up by these 3 points: to support BC's young people and their families when working with the provincial child and youth welfare system, to provide oversight to the system and make recommendations to improve it, and to improve outcomes for children, youth, and eligible young adults receiving government services in BC. We have a number of different program areas in the office. I'm mainly going to be speaking about the advocacy office or the advocacy unit, but we do have the CID reviews and investigations team, our monitoring team, and we have a First Nations, Métis, and Inuit relations team that brings everything together. The priorities of our office really guide the work that we do. And in Canada, 53% of children in foster care are Indigenous, but account for only 7.7% of the child population, according to the census in 2016. And in 2018, there were 7,000 children in care in BC. 63% of those were Indigenous, even though First Nations children make up less than 10% of the population in the province. The priorities include Indigenous child and youth well-being, transitions from government care into healthy adulthood, complex issues and system response, so mental health, substance use, exploitation, intergenerational trauma, persistent lack of connection, children and youth with special needs, and early intervention. Our office is guided by a number of different rights. So we're a rights-based organization, and the cornerstone of the rights that we use to uphold the work that we do is the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. We also use UNDRIP, which in BC has translated into DRIPA, which is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Persons, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. And because we also work with young people in care, we follow the Child and Family Community Service Act, Section 70, which outlines the rights of children and youth in care. Our mandate is, while it seems quite broad, it is actually very narrow. And we have a number of different areas that we can advocate within. Child and youth protection and family support, addiction services, youth justice, early childhood development, children and youth special needs, adoptions, and child and youth mental health. Because this is a specific session regarding transition to adulthood and life after high school, I mentioned earlier that one of the priorities in transitioning to adulthood is a priority here with our office. It's both an exciting and challenging time. However, it is, like Carla said, fraught with a lot of emotions. If there are complexities for that young person, like being in care or having diverse abilities, this can be even more challenging to adjust to life being an adult. We know that turning 19 does not immediately mean that a switch is flipped and the young person is immediately ready to go out into the world without support. Planning for this time is crucial, and for some, the planning process should start early, as young as 14. But we know that this does not happen, and that all of the systems that support the young person have different timelines and schedules and can be a source of many issues and concerns. So some of the advocacy that can take place before a young person turns 19 occurs within the MCFD child welfare system or delegated Aboriginal agencies, and that transition to adulthood from care. So that could be a young person on a continuing custody order, or it could be a young person who's transitioning from a special needs agreement or a voluntary care agreement. So some of the things that we look at as advocates is, what the permanency and stability is for that young person, whether they have a transition team, whether all the assessments that need to be done, as they get closer to 19 have been completed. Are there outstanding medical and dental needs that need to be addressed? And when we're looking at the transition of a young person in the care of their parents to CLBC, so those are specifically children, youth, and families who are working with within the CYSN system. We're looking at timeliness, assessments. Are there any communication issues on the team? Is everybody on the care team that needs to be there? Is collaboration happening with CLBC? There is a memorandum of understanding that is in place between MCFD and CLBC. We look at self-advocacy, personal support, their eligibility, what did the housing and care needs need to be for that young person? What are their views on planning? And what do the legal needs and advocacy need to be when that young person does turn 19? Our office also has a mandate to advocate for young people aged 19 to 24. And that happened in 2013 when our office underwent a legislative change to allow us to advocate for young people who are eligible for CLBC services. And then in 2019, our mandate was again expanded to include young people who are eligible for the Agreements with Young Adults program and the Provincial Tuition Waiver program. So the advocacy that takes place, after 19, so we would be advocating with Community Living BC, again, looking at self-determination and choice, self-advocacy, personal support, eligibility, if there have been concerns with eligibility, wait lists, resource allocation, income security and personal finances, housing options, transportation, health, all of those needs, because we know that those things often don't coincide with that young person's 19th birthday, and there might be many outstanding issues that may occur, and then we would have to be advocating with CLBC to ensure that young person's needs are being met. When it comes to the AYA program, so that's the Agreements with Young Adults program, and that's funding that's provided from the ministry to young people who left care at 19 under a continuing custody order or a youth agreement. And those are the only two eligibility criteria for the AYA program. So some of the issues that come to our office include lack of information and awareness. Young people weren't told about those programs or that program before they turned 19. Eligibility issues. Again, if a young person was on a youth agreement up until 2 months before they turned 19 and ended it, they're not eligible for the AYA program. So we do get calls like that coming into our office. We get requests for coaching and mentoring to have, appropriate conversations with their AYA social worker. We get, young people calling with concerns about mental health and how it's impacting their ability to participate. And then for the Provincial Tuition Waiver program, this is something that I wanted to really highlight, is that some of the advocacy that I've noted in the province is that there's insufficient information about the program being provided to the community. So the eligibility is that a young person has to be formerly in MCFD or a delegated agency's legal status for 24 months. So it could be, or the MSDPR child in the home of a relative program. So they have to be, it could be an SNA, a voluntary care order, a temporary care order. And this program is available for young people 19 to 26 inclusive, or if a young person is out of school, they're eligible from the age of 17 or 18, as long as they're no longer in MCFD care. So it's 24 months in care at any point of a young person's life. And the eligibility requirement is that they're studying for full or part-time at a BC public post-secondary or trades institution. So this also allows young people who have diverse needs to attend post-secondary, in credit and non-credit programs. The courses can be for unclassified programs, non-credit trades, and continuing education, and any non-credit course for lifelong learning or the labor market. So some of the things that our office can do and can't do, RCY advocates can review, request, inform and advise, empower and encourage. What we can't do is we can't override decisions that have been made by the ministry or MCFD, delegated agencies. We can't remove children. We cannot represent children in a court of law, and we don't make decisions. We're not case managers or decision makers. And if you're interested in how, what it looks like when you're calling the office, parents and family or community service providers, social workers can call our office. That call goes through our 1-800 line. They would speak to an admin assistant or an intake coordinator. That's the first point of contact. That person is going to grab, just basic information. They're going to assess if it's in mandate, and they're going to forward that to our intake advocates. And then there is a 3 to 5 business day callback when it goes to an intake advocate and gets put on our queue. So those intake advocates are going to obtain and assess information. Again, they're going to confirm mandate, and they're going to provide information, advice, support, and referral. And if at that time they determine that it's out of mandate, they will refer to appropriate services or encourage some direct individual advocacy that the person can take on their own. If it does get screened in and passed forward to an advocate, the advocate will determine the level of support that's required. They'll advocate for the process to address the issue, and they will contact the ministry. There is, due to our legislation, we're not able to share information with individuals who call our office. So any information that we gather through the course of our advocacy, we're not able to share with those adults who contact our office. And if you're interested in knowing what the process is like for a young person who calls our office, so under 19 or a young adult who's calling, the admin piece gets cut out. The initial call comes into our office, and that initial call, if the person identifies as a young person or a young adult, they get passed almost immediately on to an intake advocate, and they don't have to address that first step. And so some information, I'm aware I'm almost out of time. Some contact information for our office. You can contact us at our email, rcy@rcybc.ca. You can phone us at 1-800-476-3933. And we now have a text line for young people, and that number is 1-778-404-7161. That's it for me, and I'd like to pass it over to Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. Hello, everyone. My name is Tracy Matovich, and I'm so pleased to be here today. I'm calling in from the traditional ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I would also like to acknowledge all the diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis who also share this land. I'm here. I am the manager of Child and Youth Services for the Public Guardian and Trustee of BC. And I also have with us is also my colleague Allison Leaney, who's the provincial coordinator for vulnerable adult community response for our services to adults division. So I'd just like to speak a little bit about our mandate how the PGT is organized, and what transition services we offer in terms of for youth. I have a few resources and some information at the end. So I'm going to share my screen, which we practiced, and it worked okay. Um, okay, I think so. And now, how's that? I think that should work. Um, So the public guardian and trustee belongs to the Ministry of Justice. The public guardian and trustee is a corporation and a person. The public guardian is Catherine Romanko, and she answers to the Attorney General. However, we are an independent arm's length body, and the reason for that is because we act as a fiduciary, which means that our responsibilities, first and foremost, are for our clients. And so we sometimes can be in opposition to the government and the very ministry to which we belong. So we needed to have a measure of independence. Um, the public guardian and trustee is supported by the deputy public guardian and trustee. That's Dana Kingsbury. She's responsible for information and privacy requests, reviews of decisions, and legal services. The public guardian and trustee as a whole has three specific mandates. Our mandate is to protect the legal and financial interests of children under the age of 19, to protect the legal, financial, personal, and healthcare interests of adults who require assistance with decision making, and to administer the estates of deceased and missing persons. To support this mandate, we have three operation divisions: child and youth services, services to adults, and estate and personal trust services. Um, and because we're talking about financial and legal issues that we're protecting, we sort of look at our divisions in terms of the number of clients that we have and the assets that we are holding or protecting for our clients. So child and youth services, before I'm just going to sort of briefly discuss each of the divisions. Child and youth services has four types of clients. So what we call a litigation guardian client, which would be a client um, who either has not a guardian or who has not a guardian who is able to act for them. This often happens when perhaps a child might be in a car accident with their parents, and they might be in a conflict in terms of the injury for the child involves suing their parents to resolve that injury. So the public guardian and trustee can step in and act as litigation guardian for that child in those instances. We also have clients and we act as property guardian. As Tracy mentioned, MCFD is the guardian of the person. So they are responsible for the day-to-day care for children in care. We are specifically legislated under the Child and Family Community Services Act to act as property guardian when a child is brought into continuing care. It's very specific and it's a little more defined. Those other care statuses do not apply to the public guardian and trustee in all cases. So AYA or temporary custody orders or a voluntary care agreements do not apply to the public guardian and trustee. We also manage protective legal reviews for all children in British Columbia. That involves settlements, perhaps looking at where a child is named as a beneficiary in a will, and just ensuring that that child is where a minor child under 19 is treated fairly. So we might start a claim on their behalf. Additionally, we have trust services where funds are paid in trust to our office to be held for that child until they are 19. We invest those funds and hold them until they turn 19. And for children in the continuing care of the province, we also had as Tracy had mentioned, they had legislative amendments in 2013. Ours was in 2018. And what it allows us to do is to provide post majority trust services. So if a child who was previously in care turns 19 and would like some help with their funds, they are able to um, um, ask the public guardian and trustee if they would continue, if we will continue to hold their funds in trust for them. So that's just a little bit about the kinds of services that we offer. There are many services that we offer and services to adult that apply to this particular group of young people who are transitioning from care. Particularly the assessment and investigative services, where a client might uh, the assessment and investigative services division in services to adults might get a call that they're concerned about a client's or a person's ability to manage their funds or manage their legal activity, and they feel that there may be issues of abuse or neglect or self-neglect. And it's a very difficult thing, and Allison can maybe jump in if she'd like. There are many children who or young adults who may or may not make a sort of choices that perhaps seem beneficial for them. And there's a difference between making a choice that is not beneficial and perhaps making being incapable of making those choices. So it's a very fine line, and there's a lot of information that our services to adult division would need to gather. They have the power to gather information and to take some steps should they feel that there's an immediate risk to a person's um, uh, financial status. And but they would only step in when there is not someone to who could act for them. So it's a very um, it is a very sorry, the word I'm looking for is it's a continuum. So we want to and for adults or for young adults, we need to assume the very underpinnings of adult guardianship require that we assume that a person is capable, and that we provide the least intrusive methods of support or tools of support. So it's a continuum for things for like an informal resolution where someone might help someone with their bank accounts or help them set up regular online payments. All the way up to committeeship, which is where the public guardian and trustee or a private committee could act for that person in all of their financial and legal decisions. In addition, there are some considerations in terms of healthcare decisions. If a person is not able to make their own healthcare decisions, in our services to adults division, there may be there's opportunity to be named as a temporary substitute decision maker. And I'm sure Allison's going to say that that is definitely the last resort. So our office would work with that person to see if there were someone else who might be able to help them if it is clear that they are not able to make those decisions. They also work with external healthcare health authorities and CLBC to assist where they are able and to connect a person that they've become aware of to those services that are available in the community. Um, so I think the thing that I wanted to discuss in terms of the transition services that we offer. So for our child clients, all children in BC are eligible, as I mentioned, for uh, protective legal reviews, and I don't, it should be on there. A third point would be trust services. So protective legal reviews involve reviewing wills to make sure that a minor child under 19 is adequately represented under the particular applicable laws. Um, Reviewing contracts for children, so in particular for entertainment, reviewing settlements or court orders, or eh, uh, decisions in terms of injury for a child, personal injury. That's a large one. um, we, once we may hold those funds in trust, based on any decisions that are made or settlements that are made. We would hold those funds in trust, and then we would, based on the level of the trust itself, in child and youth services, it's $25,000. We would then invest that money. Under 25,000, that money is kept fairly liquid, and it might be held it would be held in a money market fund, so that it's available for any particular special opportunities, or uh, items that a child might want to request. Our most popular request for trust funds from a child's trust are for assistance with education, and also vehicles. Those are our biggest requests. I should be clear that there's a distinction between funds that are allocated for that child's particular care, and funds that fall for personal injury are not allocated for a child's care. So we couldn't assist the family in that, with using that child's funds. Our job is to protect that pot of money until that child turns 19 and is able to use it. For children in continuing care, what we call, as I mentioned, property guardian clients, we do a lot of financial wellness preparation. Our transition starts working with MCFD and social workers beginning at age 14, to make sure that gradually those young people have some awareness of basic financial tools, such as having a bank account. We assist young people to uh, get their ID, to be able to make some decisions about what they would like to do with those funds when they turn 19. For anyone who is eligible, we would apply for a registered disability savings plan and hold those funds, and ensure that particular young person receives any bonds and grants that they're eligible for until they turn 19. And starting at age 17, we would begin to work to see if there is someone in that child's life to whom they might need assistance, who would be willing to take over and assist that young person to continue to file their taxes, and be able to then transfer that RDSP to the care of that young person. Another service that we have been developing over the last few years since our legislation changed is will making. And that sounds a little morbid, but for children in continuing care. A large amount of the trust funds that we are holding are due to personal injuries. And often, unfortunately, some of those injuries can happen because of injuries that they received in the care of their family members. And so will making has become a means for young people to have a measure of control and some say over what might happen to their funds. As a matter of fact, I just had a call this morning from one of our officers who was working with a young woman who received a fairly large trust recently, and they had that discussion. They were working through some of these transition issues, and she was emphatic that she did not want her funds to go to her parents, which is what would happen if a young person age 16 on uh, didn't create a will. So that's what they're working on, and our legal team in child and youth services can assist to help find a lawyer who would be willing to work with a child to do something like that. Um, if there are any open legal matters that we might be investigating for a child, as we're transitioning, so beginning at age 16, if there are legal matters open, we would work with that child, their social worker, and our legal team to determine whether that child's willingness and ability to take on whatever the legal issue is that we're working on, and and help set them up so that they would have legal representation when they turn 19, and they can carry on a particular action that we may have started that might not conclude by the time they reach 19, and we no longer have authority to work with them. I mentioned that we have post-majority trust services, which are in large part, it's a new tool to allow young adults who, as long as they are able and they see the options and are available, that the options that might be available, can have a choice. And if what happens often for children in care or children who have been in care is that they are not clear on what they want to do with any funds that they might have, and they don't have someone close to them to be able to assist them with it. Or what we have heard from some youth is that they're actually concerned because they feel like family members are sort of know that they have a trust, and as they turn 19, their people are interested in asking for help or asking for money, and they don't feel equipped to deal with that. So that's something that by giving their consent for the public guardian and trustee to hold those funds, to continue to hold those funds, we're able to assist right up until that person turns 27. As I mentioned, and in more general terms, the PGT, our Child and Youth Services Division, offers financial wellness workshops. We have a number of resources that I'm going to point to in the next slide that assist. So they're geared towards beginning, I guess, age 14 up to post 19, but I have had adults give me some feedback that they really enjoy the information and that they've learned a lot from our resources. They're starting to get a little dated, but we're hoping to update them shortly. And then, as I mentioned, there are also, for those young adults, there are potential in our services to adults division. We are able to investigate financial abuse, neglect, or self-neglect. We're able to provide some supports in the form of providing information, providing options to consider. So, as I said, along that continuum from something very informal, some informal resolution for a young person, all the way up to comiteeship, should that be necessary. And I think that I have quite a few references that are available on our website. Financial wellness information, dollars and cents, is a guide that I was mentioning. But the options to consider guide that I was discussing is really, it outlines that whole continuum and the options that someone who wanted to assist a young person could begin with. And so I think that's really all I wanted to say, and I will turn it over to Leanne. But before I did that, could I just, Allison, did you have anything you wanted to add? I'll take that as a no. So thank you. So I would like to turn it over to Leanne Dospitall, who is the advocate for service quality. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Tracy, and many thanks to Inclusion BC for inviting me to talk to you about advocacy and transitioning from youth to adulthood, which I think Carla aptly talked about, bracing yourself for that transition. I will be sharing my screen as well. I've got a few PowerPoints here for you. Slides. I like to have visuals. There we go. So the Office of the Advocate for Service Quality is in Vancouver on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, and we too are very grateful for the ability to work here. This is a photo. I've included a photo of my very small team of 3. That is Nick, Salima, and I, and it is the one and only time that we were able to meet in person this last year. It was safely with masks and in the summertime, as you can see, which I think we're all very much looking forward to that summertime. I've also included some information here about how you can connect with us. The best way is by email at asq@gov.bc.ca. So as the Advocate for Service Quality, I report directly to the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. And the current minister is the Honorable Nicholas Simons. As the Advocate for Service Quality, we are independent, neutral, and objective. We help government to better support people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. We do primarily work with adults who are CLBC eligible, but have that we work with, our mandate includes young people who are transitioning from the youth services to adult services. Nick Birch and Salima Jamal, who you saw in their earlier photo, they are program advisors and they are the first point of contact for calls to our office. So being mindful that we all have our own stories, it's a challenge when a problem arises to get people to gather around a common story. When you call our office, we will ask a lot of questions. We will listen. We will truly listen, really acknowledging the fact that there's a likelihood that you've been telling your story many times to many different people. So one of the primary things that we will do is really listen to what you're saying. So Nick and Salima and I all take that time to hear what's going on from your perspective. We will also provide information, we provide advice, we provide referrals to the right services. We also build relationships and collaborate with the people who are involved in the problem that we've been, that has come our way. And that's, we will work collaboratively with Community Living BC, with the Ministry of Children and Family, and as well as health authorities, families, people who have an intellectual and developmental disability, and service providers. Basically, we want to engage with all people who are involved in what has come to us as a complaint. One of the things we do first and foremost after we connect with people is to find the facts of what's happening and to look for that common ground. And that's that, well, once we talk to everyone, what is that common factor that can help move that problem forward? I also have the responsibility to shine the light on systemic issues. And when I do see those issues, I bring them to the attention of the minister as well as leadership at Community Living BC. My office will make recommendations to change or improve practices and policies. And largely, if I could leave you with one thing, is that our office helps to solve problems. About 60% of our calls are from people with a disability and their families. And perhaps not surprising to you, seeing lots of familiar names, it's really great to see you on this platform. It's been a while. About 70% of those people calling are mums. Again, I don't think that would be a surprise to you. People do call about a range of issues, some of which I've included on this slide, but for youth who are transitioning, the primary issues that prompt someone to give our office a call is around the planning. Planning can start, Tracy Isles was saying earlier, as early as 14, although I don't think that that's a common occurrence. I think that planning sometimes is maybe not done to the depth that should be, or it's not heading in a direction that people want it to be. So planning is one of the primary issues that youth who are transitioning will call about. Also funding. That is the hardest piece, is when you're leaving children's services and going to adult services, everything can look very different. There's new acronyms to learn, there's new different sources of funding, and it doesn't look the same as when a child is receiving children's services. Another issue that comes up during this transition period, and in fact all transition periods, is when there's what I call interministry involvement. And that means when someone has involvement with a health authority, with social development and poverty reduction, and Community Living BC. It can get very confusing and complicated, and our office will be there to help sort that out. And I think one of the issues, and I'll talk about this in a minute, is around self-determination. And that is probably one of the biggest areas of challenges for a youth who is transitioning and relying on the supports of family and friends. And I think, you know, woven through all of the problems that come our way and the complaints and the issues, I do believe that communication remains the core problem of most of the issues. And it's like, when was something communicated? How was it communicated? Who communicated it? And so that is something we're always paying attention to, is how are decisions communicated to people, and are they given an opportunity to really understand what's being shared with them? So I'll talk to you just a little bit about self-determination. In British Columbia, the adult guardianship laws say that when a person turns 19, that they are capable of making their own decisions and they have the right to self-determination. But self-determination isn't about a person's age or IQ. Really, it's the more opportunities for a person to make real choices, that's going to make the difference in their life. I use an example when I'm told, and this is a frequent thing that I'm told, when I'm told that a young person has the mental age of an 8-year-old, I challenge that. And I explain that that does not take into account the lived experience of that young person, nor does it take into account the opportunities the person has had to learn or to make choices throughout their lifetime. Sometimes someone needs support to make those decisions, and self-determination, and that support for self-determination can include working collaboratively with the person, respectfully questioning their decision and challenging them on what their choice might be, and discussing the responsibilities, and looking to have an informed decision, looking for the options. I think when we think of supporting someone to make a decision, it isn't making a decision for them. It is including a person to, again, to ask those important questions so that they can really make that informed decision. And that is a tricky thing when someone is transitioning from youth to adult. It's hard for all parents to let, I guess it's part of it's letting go. But I think what's important to note is that the more decisions a young person can make throughout their life, the better able they will be able to be independent once they reach adulthood. So this slide I know will ring true for a lot of you. All adults with developmental disabilities should have equitable access to healthcare. So over the 5 years that I've been the advocate for service quality, I've seen that healthcare services, or the lack of, in some cases, or the lack of coordination, is a very concerning issue. Over these years, I have identified that there are gaps in provincial leadership, there's gaps in data collection, there is a need for specialized and bridging expertise between disability, health, and service. And I think a great example of how that could work was during the teleconferences that perhaps some of you have attended over the COVID period that CLBC hosted. And they had Dr. Danielle Bain-Smith from the Provincial Health Office attend and provide information and answer questions. The value of that bridging role that Dr. Danielle Bain-Smith played is a great demonstration of how that could work. And it also highlighted for me about how that doesn't exist ongoing, and I'd really like to see something like that. The other thing that I've noticed over the 5 years is that we need desperately to update the guidelines that define the roles and provide direction to Community Living BC and the health authorities. So many times I'll see a situation where a person is receiving health services as a child, they become an adult, and it becomes an issue of whose responsibility to fund those services will be. And I have that, you know, CLBC points to health and health points to CLBC. And the person who is at the center of that, often feeling frustrated or not even valued. As part of the systemic piece of this health issue that we've identified, I am participating on some committees and working groups to help find solutions. Specifically, the work that I'm looking at are people with complex needs, so complex healthcare needs, mental health, substance use. I think that focusing on that area is going to prove to be one of the better outcomes. When you're focused on one issue, I do find as an advocate, it allows you to get that expertise, spend the time to engage all the various partners, and perhaps really get some action out of what we know are ongoing problems. Also, as part of looking at equitable access to healthcare, I am co-chair with the Vice President of CLBC, John Stinson, on the Health Working Group, which is part of the Reimagining Community Inclusion Initiative. There is information I can provide to you about this, but I did want to let you know that that exists. And it is a group of people from healthcare, families, self-advocates, and other in CLBC to be able to look at these issues that I've been pointing out to you and to highlight them, not just as an issue, but to say, well, what are we going to do about it? What is the action that is going to come from knowing that this issue exists? So if I could leave you with one thing, I did want to say that advocates aren't decision makers. Just like Tracey highlighted earlier, we're not decision makers. We can't override decisions. But by gathering the facts, by listening to all perspectives, we do find that we are able to influence the decision makers and to do the right thing or to make a different decision. So please call us if you need any help solving a problem. And I want to thank you very much for inviting me to join you. And I look forward to your questions. So I'll pass it over to Carla. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Noting that we only have 6 minutes left, there were several questions we received through the chat. So Erica has captured everybody's name, and if we don't get to your question, we'll ensure we follow up with you individually. Some of the themes I've seen coming through the chat, and I just wanted to speak to, there are many, many sessions, toolkits, guides out there to support transition. Many of them can be found on Inclusion BC's website. I also wanted to highlight, if there's young adults that are looking for work, there's a fantastic program called Impact that's supported by many of our members to do some career planning and theming for young adults around employment. This session was really designed to introduce you to the 3 main provincial advocacy offices that are available to support you when all of those other processes go sideways. As well as you can always call Inclusion BC's advocacy line and we can help navigate that as well. But Tracey from the RCY, you generated many questions right off the bat, so let's just hop in. One of the questions was, is the tuition program waiver just for those youth that are supported through the Ministry of Children and Family?
Yes. So the tuition waiver program was initiated back in 2013 to support young people who have lived experience in care. The eligibility criteria, though, is that they have to have spent 24 months in care at any period of time between the ages of 0 and 19. And that could be a special needs agreement. It could be a voluntary care agreement. It could be on an extended family program or the child in a home of a relative program. So it's very broad, the eligibility criteria, but they do have to have spent 2 years in care of some kind with MCFD or a delegated Aboriginal agency.
So just a point of clarity on that. So in care of a relative, does that count as well?
It does. So if it's a formal care agreement with the ministry or a delegated Aboriginal agency, it has to be a formalized agreement. It can't be something that, Tommy went to go live with Auntie Sue because of whatever. It has to be a formalized agreement with the ministry.
Okay. Here's a question that we often receive at Inclusion BC. But what if my family member doesn't qualify for Community Living BC, but still requires supports? Where can they go? And I bet each one of us can answer that, but I see Leanne nodding. So do you want to tackle it first, Leanne?
Sure. I think that's hard. I think if you're not, part of it is looking at the person as a whole and what services that they could use to support them and to live an independent and full life. If they're not eligible for CLBC, there are employment programs. There is the Persons with Disabilities benefits, which comes with health supports as well as employment. And then there are the community sources that getting involved in the community with various agencies. I do think it's tricky because if a person needs actual support to live that daily life and they're not eligible for CLBC, it can feel like there isn't anything for them. But I do think that the employment programs are probably the best option in that situation. I don't know, Tracy, if you had anything to add to that.
I think, I would echo everything that you've said. Finding the natural supports in that young person's life and creating that circle of support around them is really important. That's the safety net for that young person so that they can be carried, through any crisis that they might encounter. And that circle can be, not just family, but it could be a family doctor. It could be, a neighbor who lives down the street, or, the landlord. It's just having that conversation, but also really including that young person about who they want in that circle and who they trust and want to be a support to themselves.
And just to follow up, from an Inclusion BC's perspective, we don't use the CLBC eligibility criteria to offer our advocacy support. So you can always reach out to one of our advocates and we can connect you with some local supports and community-based programs, employment programs, even some post-secondary opportunities. So don't be discouraged if you don't qualify for CLBC. Doesn't mean that there's nothing out there for you. It just means we need to take a different path and channel towards that. And one of the questions that's kind of connected to that, which will be our last question, and maybe I'll just answer it for the sake of time, but there are many people that are eligible for persons with disability benefits that aren't supported through Community Living BC. So for example, there's about 24,000 people supported by CLBC, but over about 107,000 people in our province that are eligible for persons with disability benefits. So there's a lot of community and advocacy organizations that can support you around those processes as well. So my sincere apologies that we weren't able to get to all of our questions, but we do commit to following up individually with each of you to answer the ones. I know there's a lot of interest particularly for young adults with autism and support around transition. So we'll certainly add that to our list for our upcoming sessions. Before we close, I just want to give a sincere thank you for the three of you, our panelists, for taking the time out of your very, very busy days to share what you do and about your organizations. And as we close, and there will be a survey that pops up, but please feel free to let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see. Yes, we appreciate your feedback. And on that note, farewell, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.